person I most like to be analytical and self-deprecating with is my sister. She can take it. She tells me to reframe. Everyone could benefit from a conversation with her. She's who I go to when I need to dissect the hard topics that I wake up obsessing about. I'll ask tons of questions and she'll sister us through via text or wine or coffee. All useful vices, since the Davy sisters are a strong cup of coffee. So come here if you can relate or need some sistering yourself. There'll be lots of laughter and a whole lot of reframing as we work our way through some of life's big and small stuff together. Hey, Nat.
Hey, Bec.
Wow. Took a lot to get here tonight.
Yeah, this one felt like an adventure.
I had to send the family to Best Buy to get them out of here.
I had to leave my family behind to get rid of the smell of cat pee in the car. I can't handle it. I said, Clifford, I need you to make this not be.
Cat pee in the car is awful.
Yeah, it was really horrible. I felt bad for Marsh, but I felt more badly for myself because I'm the one that has to drive to work in that car tomorrow morning. So anyways, by the time I get home, I hope it's magically shampooed away. That's the plan in my head. Serious cat mom fail. But that actually links to what today's episode's about. It's all about failing up.
What is that expression again? I love talking about failures. That's my jam. But what is this failing up again?
Okay, well, I would like us to channel the energy of a privileged white man who, even when canceled, like Piers Morgan last week, still somehow walks away rich and famous. That is the failing energy that I think that we both need to manifest. It's sort of our own kind of inside-out way to disrupt like the white patriarchal system. And I want this to be all about the opposite of regret.
Okay. I will try.
That's a goal.
I will try.
Hashtag goals.
Hashtag goals. Hashtag no regrets.
Hashtag no regrets. I like it.
Okay, but we don't want regrets, but why has failure come up in our musings? I will answer that because I think our culture is like obsessed with success.
Yes.
Right. I mean, we are like a celebrity obsessed culture and we like instant success. That's for sure. And so we see it and we want it, but then.
And social media doesn't help because we see it really visibly.
And then we compare ourselves to whatever we think
success
like. is.
Yeah.
So it's something we have to grapple with. I guess we all grapple with it.
Yeah, because it probably connects back to comparison.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like when we see pictures on Instagram, we immediately, and I mean, maybe not we, maybe it's not everybody, maybe it's just me, but it seems like it's hard not to make a comparison to that picture that you see to your own life. And maybe what you think then is missing, right? So, and if that's inevitably connected to failure for me.
I mean, I think everyone does it. I think it is a fairly universal thing. Or, I mean, there are the people who choose to not be on social media, which is, if you really are trying to control that comparison, but it's a hard one.
Well, right. Because I mean, I want to see my friends' kids. Like I want to see pictures of people now that I have access to them through these platforms. Like I want to be able to see the people that I don't get to be close to anymore, right? So to remove myself from social media completely would be to take that away. And yet, for every single food blogger that I follow, I'm like, darn you, I can't make this many recipes happen in my life. And you know that I love to cook. So, I mean, it's a comparison game all the way around.
So even with cooking a little bit, like it's like does it feel like a failure that you can't cook all those recipes?
That I can't like keep the notes the way that they would to be able to actually come back and cook the thing that I want to cook again. Like I make something amazing because I do like to cook and I make something awesome. Like, and it turns out really wonderfully one time. And Clifford teases me that he's going to enjoy every bite because he knows he's never going to get this again because it will never happen the same way again because I don't tend to write down my recipes. And so, yeah, I could channel that as a hard fail.
So then you have just a slight amount of envy or comparison, or that feeling when you see the food bloggers who are successfully recording their recipes. Or
because they have so much time to make that happen. Now, albeit if somebody was listening to me saying this and doing that work, they might be like, curse you women, you have no idea what my life is like. So there you go, right? I mean, the comparison failure piece probably doesn't work in real time, but it happens in our brains for sure.
Yeah. I feel like I just learned something new about you.
Well, there it is. Okay, so I would like to know if you have like one big success story in your mind that you sort of would look back on. I'm kind of looking at you and thinking, I know your life, so I don't know that that's how you would frame it. I certainly have somebody in my mind that I know would say for themselves that their big success story is the thing that they wear like an albatross. Like it's this thing that hangs on their neck because it happened when they were like at the end of university. And so that was like their big rise to fame. And then all of a sudden, that's kind of it. And every other piece that they've done since that time, because they're an artist, every other piece that they've done since that time has become a comparison point backwards to that thing that they did back then. So, I mean, I ask you that, but I think I'm sort of saying it to myself. Have I ever had that moment of like a big success?
That sort of becomes a weight on you.
Yeah. And I think I'm free of that weight.
I don't know if I've had that huge, monstrous success that weighs me down.
You know what? I think we've just answered another big question for ourselves. Nope. We are pretty comfortable with some good old-fashioned,
chugging along
moments.
So we can, I don't feel I've had that like one mega thing that I'm always comparing myself against.
Right. Yeah.
I'm also thinking about failure. This is a funny one. I don't know why it's definitely not failure. And as I say it out loud, it feels ridiculous, but I just had a birthday. So I just turned 41 and I'm feeling this impending invisibility in my life. Like I know as a woman, it's like you start to feel like I'm talking to mom. She's like, oh yeah, like when you turn 60, you're definitely invisible. Like people don't see you in the street anymore. And I've heard other women say that. And I'm like, when is it going to start?
Well, according to mom, this is supposed to be I'm 42 and these are supposed to be my power years.
Okay, so these are our power years.
Right now, yeah.
Okay.
So if you're feeling...
And some people have had success, a mega success already.
So if you're feeling invisible now, then we may need to have this talk hardcore and do some serious reframing because...
Yeah, well, it's not that I guess I'm ready for it. And I don't know why I think of that as failure. Like, is it societal failure that women don't get to be visible their whole... Anyway, this is like a huge...
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a big one, right?
Yeah, totally.
But it's failures on the brain.
Totally. And like in a good way, actually, now that you say that out loud, because maybe it's okay that this isn't my power year feeling. Like when mom's saying, these are your power years. And I'm like, how on earth am I supposed to... Maybe my power years will be in my 50s. Yeah. So maybe I could actually look ahead to that as opposed to feeling now somehow a failure for not feeling powerful in what mom has deemed to be a powerful time for me.
Yeah. And what's power anyway? Like, frankly, I don't know. Like what, I wonder. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
what's power?
What's power? What's regret? Well, that actually is where I want to start. I want us to start by thinking about whether regret, because that's kind of where I went at the beginning of when we first started talking here, but are regret and failure inherently connected? And how do you process regret?
Well, right off, I don't have anything to teach you, Nat.
Yes, you do. I know you do.
But I think I feel regret and failure hard. So I feel them both, and they feel quite interconnected for me. So I'm curious how you would answer that. And I think something I've struggled with is that I'm very quick to call something a failure, or I have been, or this is something I've observed in myself. So I can, call something, it's like a wash, like something, hard happens and I'm tempted to call the night a write-off, or it's like, it's something I have struggled with. I feel like I'm starting to wake up to this thing I do. And also by observing Violet, because she will now, like the other night at like 11 p.m. So she's exhausted. So that I think this is really why she's having a big reaction. But her and Elsie got into some little spat. And then all of a sudden she's freaking out and going, like running out of the room and saying, my whole day is ruined. Everything is ruined. Everything's done and messed up. It's actually so sweet because, like, sweet
big feelings
to see her have those big feelings. And it's just, such an irrational thing coming out of her mouth. So, but yet I think she must have heard me say that at some point. I'm going to own that, but then have compassion on both of us. That I am trying to, acknowledge that. Why do I wash something with negativity or call it a failure? The day isn't ruined. And it's cute to see it come up out of her mouth because it's like, of course it's not ruined. And so anyway, all to say, I do think I have tended to feel things really hard, feel it really big, and to blanket something with failure. Even to the point that I think this is kind of funny that I have, resisted failure so much. I think I do have this strong perfectionistic streak in me. So when I was in grade 11, I was doing this art project. I don't know, you probably heard this, me talk about this. But I so badly, like I have, that Ira Glass, who he says that our taste as artists, we can have really good taste, but we're not capable of performing or executing to that taste yet.
Right.
So you have to keep practicing.
Yeah.
So let's just say in grade 11, I had great taste for what good art should look like. And I so didn't want to fail, I guess, at achieving this greatness that I could see. So I got my friend to do this elaborate art project for me. So I didn't do it. I got her to do it all. She was this older friend, sort of mentor in my life. And she did the art project. And it was so good. Like, it was a really excellent art project. So good that I got invited into this special art class for the next year. Like, the art teacher came by and was so bedazzled by my work.
So beautiful.
And he was like, please, who are you? Why have I not known you in this school? Please come join this special class. And I don't know, I think back on that, I'm like, it was humiliating, of course, deep down, but also like, I think I took the glory. Thank you. But I just see that as that, I think isn't that like fear of, like, a desperate fear of failure?
Okay, I need to know, because I knew the first part of the story, but I don't think I've ever heard the follow-up. Did you take the invite and go to that class?
No, I didn't.
Oh my gosh, Rebecca. So that would have been a perfect moment of channeling that energy, that fail up energy that I'm telling you all those old white men are doing. And you could have gone into that class and just been there.
And I could have made, like,
and
maybe
turned
I
your
could
humiliation into something amazing.
Yeah. And maybe I would have made, like, maybe I could have made anything. And the guy had already seen me one way. So maybe he just would have told me I was amazing and kept telling me that no matter what I did.
And those guys believe it. So why can't you believe it?
Yeah. Like that could have been a turning point.
That everything went. No, it did not.
And then I would have had that mega success that we. Anyway.
Wow, that's beautiful, though, actually, to really think about that. I've never known the second part of that story. So I just learned something there, that we fall probably prey to feelings of self-critique, right? Like, there's a critique there. There was an unwillingness to see your own awareness of this other person's aesthetic strength as something to benefit you and then go forward with. Instead, you immediately diminished yourself. And that has been something that certainly I have. I mean, imposter syndrome, I would connect back to regret. Yeah. If I'm really looking at my life in relation to sort of some of the stories you've just shared there, like in academia, certainly But even in teaching, I mean, if you're constantly comparing yourself against other people's gifts, the tendency to go to the Star Wars kind of dark side idea is to sort of say, well, if they're amazing, I'm not. Or if they've written this piece and published here and that's not the place I publish, then I'm not as good, or I shouldn't even bother now. And so I think that a regret would be not beating that feeling down, like just kind of like the persistence to push through it so that I'm looking at you saying this, but I wish I kind of had a mirror to say it to myself right now, that I deserve to have my words read in those same spaces. Like that would be something that I regret not having told myself earlier.
That
I deserve to be in that art class.
Yeah. Right? That I'm as valid as.
Yeah. And I mean, we're saying it to our kids. So like if part of life is to be like the good model for the youth coming up, then I think that we are giving them the right mantras to keep saying to themselves, right? To beat down those painful, hurtful, self-flagellatory sentences that, young people can start to say to themselves a little bit too early. Like the day is ruined.
I know the day is everything's
all
ruined. Like it's so adorable to hear a 7-year-old say that, or an 8-year-old. Does Frankie say stuff like that?
Yeah.
Would he say something like this is ruined? Everything's ruined?
Well, like at the end of the day, if something had gone wrong at the end of the day, he'd be quite honest. If I said, okay, this was a good day, thinking that we'd gotten over it. And he'd look at me like I'm crazy. Like, no, we just had this happen and that was sad. And now we're still getting over being sad. And so like in that time, I think is a bit amorphous for certainly him as a 7-year-old, than to go back to the beginning of the day, which is wonderful. It's like a big hurdle to jump over the last moment, which he's still recovering from, even though I want him to make that jump with me. So, I mean, perhaps less about like a swath of day is gone, but he's very good at focusing on something small, which can get in his own way.
Yeah.
So we definitely have some work to do. I'm hoping we have a few more years
to work on that.
To work on that.
I feel confident that you do.
Oh man.
Well, what failures stand out for you in your life? I mean,
yeah. I mean, like when you say, because even when we started talking about all this, I had written down in sort of my notes for myself eras of failure in my life. Because
like where to pick from?
Yeah. I was like, do I pick from my 20s? Do I pick from my 30s? But I think you actually wrote down the word areas. And so then I was wondering, okay, so maybe that's a good way for me to sort of look at this question. So what areas were you thinking about?
Well, and I don't know, I don't think in eras or what area, but I like the areas I think that have, the most potent for me are certainly writing. So my career, writing, mothering is a big one that I constantly, butting up against my failures, or mothering is so, that one's such a big one because you kind of screw up all the time. So that's a real one where you get to see yourself, so
really up close and personal. Yeah.
And, and then relationships, of course, with Simon and friends. That's a big one. But I mean, like, I'm even thinking of, little mundane things. Like I was interested on the weekend, Clifford was talking about, I guess he had tried to practice the piano with Frankie. And
because I was out of the house. So he thought, let's give this a go.
And that was usually your area to do that. So you figured out a system. And it was just funny to listen to Clifford because he was like, it was, he kind of repeated it a couple of times, just how hard it was. And then we had to hug for a long time after. And then we just lay on the couch and just hugged. And I just said never again. And then I got him some coloring and we colored, and like we found their power or something. I don't know, whatever. But I've just like, I have had so many traumatic piano lessons with the girls where I've tried to help them. But the funny thing was, it was just interesting to listen to Clifford because he's just like, this is clearly not a good place for us. Like this is, I get obviously upset and I'm making Frankie upset or whatever. I don't know. He didn't actually even get into it. He just kept saying, it wasn't, we just hugged. We needed to hug afterwards. I don't even know what happened. I can't imagine Frankie yelled or Clifford yelled at all or anything. I have yelled at the piano. But I have this like, I don't know if it's like this masochistic thing in me where I just keep going. Like I'll just try again and again. And then, so
I call it persistence.
Persistence. I mean, like there's something so wise about Clifford to say, maybe we don't need this. Of course, you are the one that's going to keep doing it. But I don't know. That is the piano is kind of a mundane one, but where I really see myself, see my failure.
That's interesting to hear you describe that moment because obviously I heard more of the details when I came home that day.
Okay.
And he did describe it not that differently from how he described it to you. It was really big for him as like, this was a fail. This was like a big dad piano fail.
He felt, okay.
That's how he really felt it. And I think what was wise in his description of the moment was that he didn't fully understand what Frankie's skills were with the piano because he assumed, because he's always listening from upstairs, he assumed the type of knowledge Frankie would have of the keys, of the notes, when there's like a different practice that Frankie and I have. But what was wise, I believe, was that Clifford recognized his limitations. And, you know, like piano's not.
So he was thinking he could do more than he could do, and was frustrated because it's not realizing all the. I mean, he did keep saying, "Wow, piano's hard."
But that's the thing, though. Like, I mean, so for you, I would probably want you to reframe and not call them failures because you do have. I mean, you have all the piano skills, right? I mean, like you are a piano teacher. You have that on your CV. So I mean, like you can do that with the girls. So it's not the same. It's not quite the same fail experience, but it's interesting that you're butting up against your own desires for perfection. That perhaps is something to kind of navigate, obviously, in all of us.
Thinking I could sit back and just, let it be what it is, but I want it to be something, or want them to push through harder. I don't know, like just, I guess it's all about expectation too. I think I get emotional. I mean, that's it's funny. That's just like such a drop. I get emotional, but it's another place where I think I could call it failure, or I could call it, a place where I encounter a lot of growth opportunity.
Ooh, yes. I like how you did that.
Thank you. With Simon though, like all our, I'll just get into big emotional places and do all the opposite. Like I'll do the opposite. I've like, the Gottman, you're not going to know.
No.
Because we've talked about this already. You don't know these cultural
touchstones.
Like touchstones.
Teach me. Go for it. I'll
learn. Gottman, whatever. He does all that. That's the Gottman husband and wife, and they do all this marriage counseling.
Oh, okay.
But like I'm doing all the opposite of the things, right? Like I'm, you're not supposed to say you do this, you. And I'm saying you, and I like no, and I'm getting heated, like getting loud. I'm waving my hands. Simon's like literally following my hands. I'm like, why are you looking at my hands?
Oh, that happens in my house.
He's like,
oh really?
Oh yeah. He's like, because it's so large what you're doing.
I put my hands in my pockets. That's my way of countering myself, because it's the only way. I don't know what culture I've become from. Like I feel very
all this waiting.
Stereotypically, I'm going to go like, maybe if our friend Karen ever listened to this, I feel very stereotypically Italian with the way that my hands.
Okay, that's nice to know that you do that too, because I feel like such a freak sometimes when I'm doing all these things. Anyway, but like I'm doing, like intellectually, I know these are the wrong things to do in an argument,
right?
But yet I'm going for them, like I'm going right at them. And can't stop. It's like this feet. I mean, like
reckless. I love it. It's like diving into a big wave.
It is kind of.
I like wade in.
Actually, at the farm, we had a little moment on the road. We had to sit down on the road and process something.
Oh, wow. Way to be with nature.
One time I ripped off my shirt. Seriously. I was so upset.
I'm not laughing at your upsetness.
Silk,
it's so beautiful
it was
that
a
you
silk
said.
shirt.
Oh my God.
It ripped it off my body like the Incredible Hulk. I'm not kidding. Why am I even sharing this? I think it's...
Well, you guys are still together.
No,
it took to my divorce to actually yell at my first spouse. So just to say, like, I never...
You guys didn't yell.
No, there was no fighting.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I just didn't know how. I'd never learned. It took until my 30s to even learn how to, like, I'm telling you, Rebecca, I was so shut off. Like, so many emotions buried, which I don't blame on anybody, but just not knowing myself. So, I mean, like, that could be a big failure. Oh my gosh, we started with regret. I do regret that a bit. I regret not having been more in touch with my feelings.
But how would
to have yelled a little bit louder? Took me time to yell.
Right, because remember I was saying, and wasn't it the last podcast I was saying where I wanted to be able to yell with you. Well, I thought I wanted that. But see, that's the thing I'm realizing in my own relationship is I don't want to yell and be so big, and I want to be able to
calmly maneuver through.
I think so. I mean, I really
moments.
appreciate that about like your relationship now with Clifford, where you guys do seem to process, like it's something I'm gleaning from that relationship now, is that I can more calmly, process and talk. I don't have to get so
big right away,
big
maybe,
and worked up.
But of course, you're learning from two people who have also had these other maneuverings, right? I mean, other marriages where they've had to, and they fell apart for reasons, right? So so you're learning from the after effects of all that,
I guess. So thank you for what you've been through.
Did it for you.
No. Well, do you have any of these kind of mundane failures or that come up for you, or?
I mean, as a teacher, oh my gosh. I mean, like I feel all sorts of daily mundane failures all the time. I can still pick back in my brain to like the moments where I went too hard at a student and didn't even mean to, or one kid who was really whip smart recognized that perhaps my way of responding to what I didn't like of his behavior was actually passive aggressive. And he was like, "Miss, just say it if you're going to say it." And I was like, oh my gosh, that's like so direct.
Oh, really?
Like, you should be the one married now, not me. Like, it was that kind of thing. Like, it was really interesting how clued in he was. Like, I'm snapping my fingers like as if somebody could see me right now, but like it was that kind of sharp. And so I have these moments where I can go back to those failures and kind of go, oh, like that was, because that was very mundane, right? I mean, these are the day-to-day experiences of a teacher in a classroom.
Although, as you say that, I think that's crazy to be a teacher, because it's like you're a parent and a teacher, and those things isn't it a lot of the
things do butt up
confronting students as we confront our children. I mean, you must get mirrors into yourself.
Oh my gosh, all the time. And you know what? Any teacher who's listening right now would be probably nodding with you on that one, because yes, like it's one of the biggest challenges. I mean, there's no doubting that the humans in front of you are full people and they're going to bring out in you feelings.
Yeah.
And so you can't go too big with your feelings, just like you shouldn't with your 7-year-old, right? I mean, that kind of thing, Natalie. Or your husband. But at the same time, there's like, a striving to be the authentic self with the students so that they connect with you. I mean, that's the whole idea of being a teacher who can connect with his students is because you are able to show who you are as a real person. Yeah. So it's like such a tightrope walk. Yeah. So failures abound in that space. But you know what? The one that I am still in an ongoing state of navigation with is my failure, if we're going to call it that, with my dissertation turned book. So I never, so you're the writer, right?
Well, okay. And just make sure everyone, so you did a PhD in 3 years. Now you did a PhD in 3 years. A dissertation. So you did it quite a phenomenal. I mean, you could call that your big, crazy success.
Right.
If we need one.
And you know what? I probably do need one, because that was kind of a big deal that I was able to get it done fast when a lot of people take like 6 years. Yeah. Which is totally fair.
That's something remarkable about you. So let's just name it.
Thank you, Bec. But I think that where I go in my head is I never thought I wanted to be some book writer, like an author per se. I had always enjoyed writing, but I really enjoyed reading more. But then somebody planted, it was my supervisor, like when I was right in the midst of my dissertation work. So just, again, I think I've gestured to this before in a former podcast, but I started my teaching career like 20 years ago, teaching in a youth prison. So a detention facility for youth. So between the ages of 12 to 17. And it was at the time central booking for Ontario. So it was like students being kids who were arrested, being pulled in from all over the province.
And then sent to different facilities?
Depending on what happened with their pretrial.
Okay.
So I would have students with me for a very short period of time, but then I'd have a few, like when one young person was in there for a really intense crime that couldn't sort of get sorted quickly. He was actually with me for 2 years. So in a very small building with like really small classrooms. I mean, really, it was supposed to be a very transitional space, but for him, it was like a lifetime in that space. So anyways, I only taught there for 2 years. And then after I left and went to kind of mainstream, I was a literacy teacher there. So it wasn't a full English classroom per se. It was literacy teaching, whether the student was with you for 48 hours or 3 months, right? You're supposed to somehow keep their learning going. That was the idea. And when I left and I went on to teach in more mainstream classrooms, in that time that I was gone, that detention center was closed and they built a larger, what they call, and I'm putting quote marks around it, super jail in outside of the city. And there were lots of really problematic things about that. Like it takes now all of a sudden young people who are criminalized and in trouble with the law from the urban center who maybe don't have the money to have family members visit if they're stuck there for a while. Now you've somehow made those family members have to get out of the city to go see their kid. Well, so now it's less possible, right? So it's just a really hugely demoralizing, dehumanizing kind of space. And when I learned that the place that the downtown center had closed, I was now teaching and I was sad, but I had no one to talk about it with. So when I ended up going back to grad school, I knew this is what I wanted to make my project. I was like, I am now 10 years out of this place. And yet why is it still a part of it's like in my body. It's like written on the body. Who wrote that book? But like that idea of it's still being in me that I wanted to.
Dionne.
Really?
Something. Dionne Brand?
Is it? Oh man, it's gonna be another one. Somebody has to go look it up. Okay, we'll go look. So I knew I needed to unpack this again. So during my PhD process, that was what I did. I found people who had been with me in that place and interviewed them. And I was able to also create an art piece with found objects that randomly, like honestly, it was super random. I had found when I was moving house, when I had moved from where I lived down by the lake to the junction to be near you and Simon. And in one of my drawers, I found letters that some of my students from the jail had written to me. And so I now wanted to kind of create like a fragment-based found art project as part of my dissertation work. So anyways.
See, we're artists.
We're
visual artists.
We are visual artists. That's so true. But so I wanted to do this piece. So anyways, my supervisor, super, super, super kind and very encouraging human, was like, Natalie, this kind of piece is really thoughtful and thought-provoking, and you're going to want to turn this into a book. So I blame him for having planted this little seed in my brain. So when I graduated, I'm like, okay, I'll write a couple papers, whatever, I'll do some stuff, but eventually I'm going to come back to this as a book. So anyways, the great failure is that every single university press that gets interested in me, as soon as and that's been 3, okay? We're talking like the biggies. I end up getting through, like they inevitably I get the letter that says, this sounds amazing. We want this so much. We'll give you our firstborn to have this project. Like it's that kind of amazing response. And then I get the reviews. And so when they send it out for reviews, it's supposed to be peer reviewed, which I respect the process. But the interesting gatekeeping that exists in university presses is that the reviewers are not all equal. So even though I'm getting great reviews from like, say, 3, if I have 2 reviewers who are hesitant, even if I make the changes that those reviewers have asked for, now the editor is fearful about taking it forward to their board because they don't want to be the one to bring forward the project that's at all risky. Mm-hmm. So this could, one could delve into the realities of academic presses, and those are perhaps less interesting details.
But you for me, experiencing this as a...
Yeah, like it's been 3 times, Rebecca.
Although Nat, I'm sorry. When you say 3, I think probably everyone listening, we're all going to be like, 3?
3 is really hard.
Well, it's not that and I'm hearing that. I think you were also set up to think it was going to be easier. And I don't actually know how many university presses are, but I did see some woman on Twitter finally having a success, and she said she had submitted her book 699 times or something. Like
it's not the same.
It was, I swear it was 699 times before she got her agent or her publisher. So 3.
Okay, 3's hard.
Seems like you can keep going though.
Okay.
Can you?
I think maybe, but I think maybe in a new way. So I think that's something that I'm having to sort of, what I'm navigating is that the yeses are not as weighty in these people's minds as the no's. And I'm wondering, as I sit with that reality, that is something that I probably have to reckon with in myself, is I can get like 800 students saying, yes, Ms. Davey, this has been an amazing lesson. And I get that one no, you're a jerk, you're mean, you don't love me, any of the thing that kind of butts up against how I want to be seen in the world. And then that no becomes the failure as opposed to reveling in the good that I've done. Mm-hmm. So that's something that probably just hits at the core of me wanting to offer something to the world. And I just imagine that there are other people who feel like what I've experienced in this. Like I've got good things to share. I want to share. And yet the no's really silence me. I mean, it's not silent enough that we're not doing a podcast. But again, I blame you because you're the one that like wooed me into this interesting space.
Yeah, I think the no's in any context are super powerful. I mean, we're even saying, with our children, if they sense no from us, that their day is ruined. So, I mean, of course we experience these things as really powerful. I've had some, I'm not sure how it's, I think yours is hard because you have to reshape it every time, right? For each press. So that requires, I'm also trying to get my YA book published, and I'm amazed at all the different ways they come up with to say no. You know what I mean? This doesn't meet our needs. I find that an interesting one. This doesn't meet our needs. You kind of just want to be like, why not? What would you like me to do for it to meet your needs? Anyway. Or this one is a good one. I expected to connect more with the characters. Oh, it's just like, ouch.
It's like a little dig.
It's so,
even if it's not whatever opinions, but
yeah,
that's creative.
Right. And although that one I just find I don't know if that's a generic one that this agent, if that's, does she send that to a lot of people? And that's her good line that because it's also something you could just say, I expected to connect. Yeah. Or if it was personal for my characters, I don't know.
I'm really connected to your character, so I of course want you to keep going. So I guess that's what we can do.
So you want me to go past 3?
I want you to go past 3. So I will also go past 3 because we'll keep encouraging each other.
Yeah.
There. So everybody find your encourager, because that's the thing that's going to get you past 3 of whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because there are obviously going to be more than 3 or 4 or 5 hurdles to jump.
Keep overcoming. Yeah. And in particular, writing is such a particular, the arts in general. So it's so subjective, so challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. And so taste driven, and people's tastes change too. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's probably the thing that I'm sitting with is maybe when I started writing my doctoral work, jails were
cool.
Yeah.
Or something
oh my gosh, that's so this thing that we all want to learn about. And now and I don't want to be that person who co-ops on a fad. It's not about that. These are real people that I was talking about and talking with, right?
But it's hard, yeah, because there are moments for things, and you know, people care about a certain issue. So I don't mean to say jail's cool, but you know
No,
what I mean?
know exactly
like
what you're saying.
This is the moment that everyone is invested in it. And
yeah. Oh, yeah. And how to sort of do something authentically and honestly without, again, it just becoming a co-opting of something.
Yeah.
Okay. So like those are some big fails. So like when it comes to failure, how do we know when the right or even a hopeful thing? Like is it hopeful of me to let go of the original text and try and shape it so new that it's not actually the thing that I thought it was going to be? So like what does it actually mean to persist but yet give up? Do you see what I'm saying? Like I'm persisting with the process of writing per se, but I'm giving up on thinking it was going to be what it was.
Well, I think that's very healthy. I mean, you're pivoting. I would see that as excellent pivoting.
Okay.
I mean, when you were talking about that earlier, just the idea of persisting or when to persist and when to give up, I was thinking of it as, you know, when do you need to give up your regret, or like when do you need to, you know, let it all go versus are you allowed to sit with your trauma or your failure? Do you know what I mean? Like that's where my head was going. I mean, that's a place that therapy has been really good for me because I have beaten myself up, I think, a little bit over, you know, Violet's heart surgery and not being like, why has it taken me 8 years and I'm still like, I can still cry about it. And like, why am I still feeling sad about, you know, my pregnancy didn't go the way I had wanted it. And there was like, why do I feel things so deeply? Surely there are people, I mean, even Simon, I mean, he's so much calmer and rational about things. So sometimes I, you know, if I compare, like, again, that's comparison. If I compare myself to him, I think I'm like a nut bar and he's like calmly navigating these waters. But that is, you know, sometimes it's good to pay people to listen to you because they are not going to tell you that you're a nut bar. They will, but my therapist did help me see that it's like, why do you have these expectations for how fast or slow one should proceed through this? This is your experience, but she is like, find a container to put it in.
That's a good one.
So you don't like, it doesn't have to be like, you know, wading in this ocean of grief all the time, but you know, you might encounter it, you know, 8 years later, you might have a moment again, and then like kind of put it in a container. Like I'm having this feeling again. It doesn't mean I'm a crazy person that can't process grief. It just means, you know, I'm butting up against it again. And that's okay. And probably Simon has his moments too. He might not articulate them to me as often as I articulate everything. But I mean,
and the word crazy is something that actually I want to like grab hold of and like carefully turn it around in my hand and like cup it, because I actually think like we know as women, the word hysterical has been so attached to femininity as something negative. That's for one thing. And also like,
I know I need to get rid of that word.
Well, it's a funny one, right? To have to get rid of or change it so that it's like a beautiful thing. I mean, like when they talk about madness studies, you know, in academia, for example, I mean, like it's a whole area of study, and think of some of the most beautiful art that has come out of these deep, deep emotions that are felt without containers, and the dangers of what happens to the artist. Like it could make me weepy as I say it out loud, like thinking of people we have loved and lost because of their deep feelings that were not able to be, they had no container in place. So I'm changing. I want to change that word for you because I think that there is no crazy in this, but they are big feelings. I love that your therapist, I trust your therapist if that's what your person has said to you. I think that's a really wonderful thing to have suggested to you, to find that vase.
Yeah.
The vase for your grief.
Yeah. And then also interesting, like I was listening to an Ezra Klein podcast the other day, and he was interviewing the author Bessel van der Kolk, I think is his name, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score. And he's a psychotherapist or psychologist. And his whole book is about how the body remembers anyway. So there's really, like, this is how I'm paraphrasing it, but there's no point in denying it. Like, so I can't, like, you know, I could call myself whatever I want to call myself. Like but the body's going to remember. So why deny it? I mean, and maybe that's when you're talking about you push down a lot of feelings. So that's
maybe
over
that's
your
my
life.
leg. Maybe honestly, it's
maybe it came out
in
a different way. Like it's like the body will remember that trauma, whatever you've experienced. So, I mean, he's saying so better to process it.
Right. Yeah.
So even if you think you're shutting it out of your brain.
Oh my gosh, Rebecca, talk about containers. My compression socks, my container.
Oh my goodness.
I'm containing my whole life in my leg. That's big. You just hit on something really big.
Containing your life in your leg. And I just went to rub it
with my sock. Oh, that's really interesting. That's new.
But okay, with all that, I do think I want to just say that I do want to keep thinking about how I can do things lighter and maybe even, I don't know how you can pick that up for yourself. I mean, given that you're saying you're now carrying away on the weight of your leg, but how can we not, we're not going to deny, but is it sometimes okay to say not right now, or I'm dropping this, like the suitcases that you drop to the ground and refuse to carry them anymore. I think there's a time for that too.
Totally. Yeah. And I want to as much as I was being flippant at the beginning about harnessing that failing up energy of folks who are not kind and not generous, and they shouldn't be winning, but yet somehow keep doing it. I would like to sort of own some of that freedom to drop the bags.
Yeah.
Right? Because
and freedom to just change. Something is done now, and
we can move forward. We're allowed to move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would high five you if you didn't make a slapping sound.
An annoying sound in the mic. No, that's really good.
Okay, as we close, then I just do we have any hopeful metaphors or lines we could offer each other?
Yes.
Just to support us through these failures or into new times of freedom.
Personal, emotional freedom to fail up. Yeah.
To fail up. It's that actually is such a great line.
Yeah. I think that for me, because I like to sort of know the name of the person I'm going to quote. So I did go and look this up earlier because I wanted to make sure I got it right. Because I almost attributed this line to a philosopher, Martha Nussbaum, who I love, who I know I read it in a piece that she had a conversation with another author who I love. Okay. But it's actually that person, Ralph Ellison, who wrote Invisible Man, which is a really, really famous novel. And it's important that I say the word novel, because this isn't a philosophy piece. This is a novel piece that this line comes from. And he talks about fiction as a raft of hope. And to basically, move us through the murky waters of life. And I mean, he's, as a Black man in the States in the 1950s, I mean, he's navigating a very different set of murky waters than I am as some privileged white woman sitting in the middle of the junction. But the reality, though, is that I can learn from that line and say that I can use art and fiction and the stories of my 7-year-old and your 8-year-old, as we kind of eavesdrop and listen to everything they make up. I can use all of this story making and narration as a sort of raft of hope to build upon if I'm going to move forward, as you say, without these feelings of failure. I mean, I want so badly for words to work, but I got to hook on to something else maybe.
So jumping on these rafts of hope.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I was thinking about mushrooms.
Ooh, tell me more. I like that.
It's just, I'm writing a new piece and I'm thinking about mushrooms and, watching some movies about them, and just, they're so interesting because they can be the end of the life cycle or they can be the beginning.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So, and Simon these days has really been encouraging me to think of things in seasons. So, maybe this is not the season for, so sometimes I can get really anxious if I'm not doing enough writing. And he'll be like, well, okay, is this your season? Is this a producing season? Is this a promotional season? Like, what season is it? And that, which really, I think is a really nice way to reframe and to kind of, let some of the anxiety go. I can't do everything all the time. So, and I think that's a nice way to look at relationships. And even I think what we're saying, like maybe this is my season for letting go of some of that trauma I've carried around the heart surgery. Like maybe I can drop it. Like maybe it might, I might bump up against it again, but maybe also I can allow myself, this is a new season where I'm not, like I don't have to feel disloyal to Violet if I don't have to keep grieving that.
Yeah. Wow.
Or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking mushrooms.
I love that.
And then I'm also just thinking of, like the joy of our children and how we see their mistakes. And like, when Elsie made a painting the other day and then she did too much and she went too far with it. And like, when you can't, sometimes you don't know when to stop with a piece of art. I would really know about this, the visual artist that I am.
No, that's me.
That's you. So you would understand perfectly when you decide to add black somewhere and then you hate it. And she was like crying and they really wanted this to be whatever. And just how much I loved her through it and just was excited that she was experimenting. This is experimentation. You're trying something, you're pushing some boundary, and how I really genuinely feel that for her. So why can I not feel that for myself? And why can you feel that too for yourself? This was a period. So some of the periods that we look back on our lives and we didn't like what we did or we regret, but we just like, I was in a period of experimentation, which I learned from, or I like whatever. Like, it's just that we don't have to be so harsh on ourselves because we aren't most of the time on our kids. And we really see it as beautiful dabbling, learning that they're doing. So
I like the word you chose, dabbling, because that's what it is, right? It's like, as you said, it's experimenting.
Yeah.
Stretching.
Yeah, it's stretching. So we should be able to stretch too and kind of have loving arms around ourselves as we stretch, I guess.
Totally. I love you, Bec.
I love you too. Thanks for chatting.
Thanks for teaching me.